For those that aren't familiar with Austrade and what we do, we're an Australian government agency that helps Australian exporters, attracts productive foreign direct investment and stimulates the visitor economy. We've got around 1,200 staff in nearly 70 international offices who provide advice, contacts and in-market support to help companies sell their goods and services overseas. I must admit it seems odd to focus a talk on China at a PNG investment forum, but one thing I've learnt over my many years engaging with China is that it is a significant player in strategic, geopolitical and economic terms for most countries around the world. This combined with quite an opaque system of information control means that people are always interested in, thirsty even, for insights about China. As such, this is one of half a dozen talks I've been asked to give on China over the next couple of months. Just to be clear about one thing though, I won't be talking about the bilateral relationship, beyond noting that from trade tensions to the pandemic and lockdowns, supply chain impacts and geopolitical shifts, the last few years have been tough for Australian businesses in China, but commercial relationships run long and deep and deals are still being done. More broadly, there's no doubt that China remains a crucial trading and business partner, not just with Australia, but globally. From PNG's perspective, China is its second largest import source and third largest export market. So let's take a look at the commercial and economic landscape in China and some of the logistical issues that are currently impacting trade flows. I'll focus on how these have been impacting Australian businesses, of course, but obviously China is a significant global player, so these impacts are universal to a degree, affecting different economies to different degrees. Of course, for Australian exporters specifically, you'll be aware of the raft of challenges with the tariffs introduced by China on Australian wine and barley, and the informal hits on everything from coal to lobster. Only part of the overall environment though. Additional challenges of operating in China include unpredictable market access, changing regulations, disrupted supply chains, and freight and logistics issues resulting in higher prices and longer transit times, particularly around refrigerated containers. That's affecting global logistics, not just Australia-China, obviously, although our route, the north-south route, is far less lucrative than the North American and the European routes, so you could argue we're suffering more. And we know businesses engaged in PNG and the Pacific more broadly have not escaped the impact of these issues. While much of the rest of the world is learning to live with COVID, China's COVID zero approach, as Saul said this morning, means that significant restrictions and strict measures remain, from lockdowns to mass testing. In fact, I read something the other day that suggested China was spending 1.8% of its considerable GDP on COVID testing alone, which gives you an idea of the extraordinary amount of money and resource going into that. To inspection of imported chilled or frozen food, resulting in lengthy customs clearances. The global pandemic continues to restrict travel into China from all countries, and domestic travel within mainland China too. I haven't left Beijing before I came back to Australia, which was only 2 weeks ago. I hadn't left Beijing for 14 months, so I had been restricted in terms of my movement there. So this has been particularly hard for some industries, international education and tourism, of course, and anything involving people flows. But for business too, not being able to move essential staff and to engage with partners and customers on the ground in the same way has been really tough. China's economy expanded by only 0.4% in Q2 from a year earlier, a sharp slowdown from the 4.8% year-on-year growth in Q1. The Q2 growth figure was China's second worst quarterly economic growth rate in decades, beaten only by the contraction recorded in Q1 2020 due to China's initial COVID outbreak. Weak consumer spending was a big drag on economic growth last quarter. The International Monetary Fund lowered its full-year growth forecast for China for 2022 to 3.3%, citing a worse than anticipated slowdown in reducing its forecast of 4.4% made only in April this year. However, despite all of this, and I tend to be a glass half full sort of a person, Australia's overall trade with China remains relatively strong. No doubt the iron ore price is having a positive effect on bilateral trade numbers at the moment, but beyond that, like I say, deals are still being done across a number of sectors. There are certainly short-term risks, and in some respects there always have been, but our economies are particularly complementary, our commercial relationships run deep and are long-standing, and our people-to-people links are strong. So what are some of the megatrends shaping China's economic development in the medium to long term? Broadly, Chinese people are becoming older, wealthier and more health conscious. And in the medium to long term, these demographic shifts play into Australia's wheelhouse and the wheelhouse of many countries around the world, especially from food and beverage to health to education and tourism when the borders finally reopen. Today, over 20% of the world's middle class lives in China. This increasingly sophisticated and urbanised consumer class are demanding safe, reliable and high-quality goods and services. While China boasts around 20% of the world's population, it holds only 9% of its arable land, which means that imported food will continue to be part of the mix for a long time to come. China's substantial ageing population is presenting significant demand for high-quality health services that China's own health system is struggling to provide. China's urbanisation story still has further to run, despite current challenges in the construction and property sectors, again, as Saul laid out this morning, indicating that continued demand for raw materials will remain. China is expected to have 220 cities with over 1 million population by 2030. And all of these trends are set against the backdrop of rapid technological innovation and change and an incredibly tech-savvy consumer class. China now has over 1 billion citizens online and is perhaps the most digitally sophisticated market in the world. Of all internet users, 32% access online education, 24% use online medical services, and 80% do online shopping. That's 800 million people doing online shopping. Business via e-commerce cannot be ignored. So what does all of this mean for exporters? On health, these demographic shifts, as well as changes to lifestyle and diet, are driving an increased burden of chronic disease. China's 5-year plan, the Communist Party's guiding document, seeks to build a powerful public health system with significant reforms in the sector focused on increasing quality and efficiency and improving elderly care services. If I could single out one sector with the potential for strong growth and commercial cooperation, it would be health. Australia has capability in many of China's areas of demand, and we've seen some excellent trade and investment partnerships develop over the years accordingly. COVID-19 has also led to a rise in consumer health consciousness and a growing interest in preventative health measures, particularly vitamins and dietary supplements. China has said it intends to reach peak carbon emissions before 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. To achieve this, the government wants more than 50% of total installed power capacity and 2/3 of the total increase in electricity consumption to come from renewable energy. This should create significant opportunities for expertise in solar, wind, microgrid, smart grid, energy storage, hydroelectric generation, geothermal and bioenergy, amongst many others. On food and beverage and agribusiness, China remains Australia's and a number of other countries' largest market. Acknowledging the past few years have thrown up a raft of new challenges for Australia, for Australian exporters. Many of our ag and F&B categories continue to do quite well here, from breeding cattle to grains to dairy, for example. These remain pretty strong, and now new subsectors like plant-based protein are taking off in China as well. Imported food is expected to play an important role to continue meeting China's food security needs. On education, there are significant capacity issues in China, with demand for places in high quality institutions exceeding supply. And many families will continue to look to international education to help realise their children's potential. Despite everything that COVID has thrown at us, China is still the largest source country of international students globally, and accounts for 29% of Australia's student population. We continue to work and see deals done across a number of other sectors as well, from architecture to advanced technology. None of these, I need to add, are without risk, and we're in an environment of increased risk for exporters globally and in China specifically. Each business needs to make a shrewd assessment of risk and reward when they enter a market or choose their level of exposure, whether that's China or anywhere else. Exporters are wise to be looking at diversifying their markets for their products where possible. This has always been a sensible approach to international expansion, and is even more so the case in the current environment. But there remain significant opportunities in China for the right firms with the right mindset, in particular, a sophisticated approach to risk management and a long-term outlook. I can't let this opportunity go without a quick hat tip to the strength of the Australia PNG relationship, and a pitch to get in contact with Austrade if you think we can help. Australian companies have a long history of working successfully with PNG companies. We have more than 4,000 Australian companies trading with PNG at the moment, and we are also PNG's largest foreign investor, with more than 17 billion invested. There are significant opportunities to partner with Australian companies, and by partnering with Australian companies, PNG companies, we hope, can increase their knowledge and technical skill set and build their new capabilities to service customers. This can lead to strong domestic business and eventually lead to creating a business that can trade and expand internationally. For further information on how Austrade can help partnerships in PNG and more broadly, please feel free to reach out to our Senior Trade Commissioner Adrian Weeks and his team, who are in the audience today, and is the key contact for the Austrade office located at the High Commission in Port Moresby.